Hey everyone, AJ here live on campus UWL. We're with the world champ, Andy Askow, this evening. He's going to take us through the ringer here, kind of run through his squat progression techniques, actually kind of leading me through his tips on his vision of the perfect squat, what he thinks is ideal for form, technique, and so forth. So I'm just going to leave it up to this guy. He knows a hell of a lot more about squatting than I do. So again, he's going to take me through the squat.
All right, Andy. So first off, let's just kind of see how it looks without.
Good start. Underneath the bar, wide grip.
I just want to see how you handle it normally. Just give me a couple of reps. Alright, so you kind of led me to believe that it was going to be really bad, so that was a pleasant surprise. So a couple of things we're seeing. One is your shoes. Obviously with trainers, you're not going to get an even stable foot position on the ground. So when you're going, you're kind of rolling between the outside and the inside of your foot, the front and back. So we suggest either a flat, hard sole or an elevated heel. It looks like you have decent enough mobility that you wouldn't really need an elevated heel, but if you would want to try that, that would be something to look into.
So what does the elevated heel do then? You mentioned it's mobility related.
Yeah, so a lot of times people have problems getting enough dorsiflexion to get proper depth in the squat.
So that's limited mobility at the ankles where you run into that issue, and therefore again jacking up the heels on a plate can help with that. These guys will know more about it than you would in terms of the biomechanics of it, but you're essentially shortening up that lever in the posterior chain.
And it allows you to kind of get your knees over your toes more, which means your hips can go straight down instead of back, which generally will allow you to keep a more upright torso. So you think in a squat, if your hips have to go back, your torso has to come forward to balance, right? So if you can get your hips to come straight down more with your knees coming over your toes, it's going to be a much more upright torso position, which in my mind is a much better position at the bottom of the squat with weight on your back. Got it. So it looks pretty good there. We're seeing a pretty decent squat actually. You made me think that it was going to be really bad, but it's not as bad as you might think it is. So
that was my max though, so that's where I run into problems when I put weight on.
So why don't we just walk it off, and we'll go through. So, oh, you want to put some weight on the bar?
That's man, all right.
Man, what do we want?
So dangerous.
You're gonna let me actually run through the ringer. No. Just see it. I want to see it from the front now. Very good, you're ready. So one thing we're seeing, have you always been a pretty wide stance squatter?
Mostly.
Mostly?
Had to cheat a little bit because I lack some mobility.
Is that through your hips or your ankles?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. So generally with my athletes, I like to see a very non-traditional powerlifting style squat. So in general, I recommend a high bar squat for the reasons of being more upright, like we talked about earlier, and then a more narrow stance squat, because I think you can get a lot more power out of the hole, even if it means that you have to squat deeper. So a lot of people think powerlifting is short range of motion, and that's all well and good until it puts you in a worse position where you're not as powerful out of the pull or off the chest in a bench press. So we generally see my athletes high bar squatting unless they've been with me long enough that they can develop their own opinions on high versus low bar squats and how they want to do it. But I start people off with a high bar squat with a more narrow stance.
All right, and do you want to walk us through the difference here between high bar, low bar, wide stance, traditional stance, and what your views are on kind of the optimal way for at least powerlifters to go about it?
Absolutely. So before I get under the bar, I'll just say that a high bar squat is generally a squat with the bar sitting more up on the traps here. You'd see generally a more upright torso with more knee travel. In a low bar squat, it's going to sit much lower here on the shelf of the rear delts, which is going to involve more vertical shins and a lot more hip backwards instead of knee forwards. So in general, what that's going to look like,
So embarrassing.
so for a high bar squat, you're going to stand erect, very upright, no forward torso lean, with the bar on top of your traps. You're going to sit straight down as much as you can with your knees coming forward, which leads to a very upright bottom position. And in my opinion, this is going to be a lot more beneficial for a power lifter compared to a more wide stance low bar squat, where right off the bat, you already see the torso comes forward to balance for the bar being more on the back. To initiate the squat, you're going to sit back more onto the heels, which means my torso has to drop. And here in the bottom position, you have a lot of forward torso lean. Under heavy weight, I find personally that I tend to collapse. And I see that a lot amongst raw powerlifters. So in my opinion, the upright, very strong positioning here is a much more beneficial position to be in for a competition squat for powerlifting.
Does it matter like height of the athlete?
It's gonna depend on the morphology, so the build of the athlete a lot. But if they can get into a decent high bar squat position, I'm probably gonna have them start there.
So if you were to wrap things up and kind of walk us through your final, take-home tips or things to focus on if you can't hit a certain range of motion, or again, what are your kind of final thoughts here, or things that are important?
We can pause for a second.
In under half an hour, I know you've been talking on this topic all day.
So I guess I'll narrow it down to three big ones. So one, get your mobility in check. It's a longevity sport, powerlifting. So if you're immobile through the hips and it's going to cause a low back problem over time, that's going to be a big deal down the line. And it's really going to rob you of longevity and progress over time, so you're never going to hit that high level that you might want to hit. Number two would probably be a way to carry out the squat. You see a lot of people kind of slow on the eccentric and just try to stand up. I don't advocate dive bombing, I'm a dive bomb squatter. But what I do advocate is when you get to about here in the squat, so just a few inches above the hole of the squat, hitting a nice little dip and trying to really explode out of the hole. And that's generally an almost immediate PR for people who tend to squat slower. I guess the third one, play around with it. I mean, play around with everything. I've been squatting for 11 years, and I've been told hundreds of times that my form is pretty perfect. But even I still play around with my stance, with how I grip the bar and how I carry out the squat. So just find what works for you, and that's what's going to be best for you. So even if I say a high bar upright squat's going to be best, if you're stronger in a low bar where you sit back, then I'm wrong in your instance.
All right, well there you have it. Tips from the world champ, Andy Askow, man, myth, legend. So hopefully you learned something today of value, and again, try to incorporate some of these strategies in your own squat routine. Thank you.